Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chatting with Charlie. The tone today is probably less light than on some of the episodes that we've had before, and I will put sort of a trigger warning here. We will be talking about self-harm and self-harm behaviors, although I will try and keep details to a minimum because this is not supposed to be an instruction how to self-harm, but the topics that I want to talk about with all of you are, so on the one hand, what is self-harm and what is it really? So I want to eliminate some of the confusion, and I also want to lesser the stigma, because there are lots of stereotypes, there's lots of stigma surrounding self-harm, lots of facts, or not facts, but lots of information out there which isn't really true. And then I've spoken to some people, both people who have been affected by self-harm, people who've been affected by self-harm in different ways. I've spoken to a parent, I've spoken to a partner of someone, and I've spoken to several people who have a history of self-harm. But they would prefer to stay anonymous, so I will share their perspectives without saying any of their names. Okay, so this is a topic that I've been wanting to talk about publicly for quite a long time, but there is so much stigma that I was kind of scared to talk about it, kind of scared to open up about it and address it generally. But I think that it's something that's so important and that so many people will profit from that I feel like I can't really stay silent. Okay, so very generally, self-harming is a method of causing yourself pain on purpose. So self-harming happens it basically, if you want to cause yourself pain, and then or if a person wants to cause themselves pain and then they do it deliberately. And I think to explain further what it is and why people do it, but then also who self-harms and why do they self-harm and what does this look like? I would like to start with the stereotype. So if we think about the word self-harm, I think lots of people have this really weird picture in their head of young white girls who basically have nothing else going on in their life. So they seek attention by listening to sad songs and slitting their wrists. This is sort of the picture, the image that we have of self-harm, and it's always, or in most sort of in most mainstream media, it's portrayed in this same way, and that's sort of what many people think that self-harm is. But self-harm behavior doesn't discriminate. Doesn't discriminate between ages and genders and ethnicities. Anyone can self-harm. Statistics say that at least 17% of people self-harm at some point in their life, but these are the reported cases, and only specific behaviors are counted as these reported behaviors. So it's suspected that the real number is a lot higher than this. And the main group, or the group with the highest incidence of self-harm is teenagers. But so there are several reasons. So it is a behavior that is more often associated with teenagers, but then we do also have the issue that it is more often reported in teenagers, and that there are specific demographics where people look out for these behaviors more and might be more likely to notice them. And then also something that I'll speak about a bit later is that these behaviors can vary. Obviously from person to person, but also there are gender differences to be seen. So I don't want to list a whole load of behaviors that can be counted as self-harm, because I think that is just triggering and might give people ideas. That's not something that I want to do. But I just want to reiterate that that basically self-harm is anything where you cause pain to yourself on purpose. So a word that sounds quite similar and has a lot of overlap, but is not quite the same, is the difference between self-harming and self-destructive behavior. So where self-destructive behavior is not always something that we do on purpose, self-harm pretty much is. So everyone engages in behaviors that are self-destructive at times. I mean, we know what's the ideal health, but everything from not sleeping enough to overindulging in alcohol, working out even though we're absolutely exhausted, lots of these things could be counted as self-destructive behavior. And they're very much normalized in our society, which is another topic that we can have a very long discussion about, but I want to try really hard to focus on the actual topic today. Yes, so whereas self-destructive behavior is something that happens a lot, it's not always deliberate, so we don't engage in this behavior with the end goal of harming ourselves. Whereas with self-harm, the end goal is harming yourself. Something that's maybe important, the goal is usually just, I mean, that's obviously really dreadful, but the goal isn't to die. These aren't behaviors usually that are that have the aim of suicide, but it's an outlet for emotions, for a whole load of different things. And just because, so this is something that's maybe important, particularly if you have a loved one who is suffering from harming themselves. It doesn't necessarily make them suicidal. It doesn't mean that they want to die, but it doesn't mean that these behaviors should be taken any less seriously, and that this isn't that it doesn't show that the individual is in great distress. So in our stereotype, I said that it's young white girls who self-harm for attention, and that is not true. Now, I want to preface this by saying I don't think there is anything wrong in doing things for attention. We do lots of things for attention in our everyday life. We blame people and we tell them they're attention seekers, and we see this as something incredibly bad, but we are all attention seekers. That is how humans or animals that live in social groups work. We want attention. We want attention from our friends. We want attention from our parents. We want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be understood, we want to be loved. We post on social media because we want to get attention for the things we're doing. So I don't believe that attention seeking is per se something negative, but we all know what we mean when we say people are doing this for attention. We're saying that they that not enough is happening in their life, or that they're not getting, that they're not always the center of attention, and other people are being talked about and talked to or whatever, and people say, oh, well, she just self-harms in order to, I don't know, be noticed by other people, and that she gets a whole load of sympathy. And in the majority of cases, this is just not true. So if we talk about the self-harm behaviors again, there are many more behaviors apart from just, slitting your wrists. Not every behavior, not every self-harm behavior leaves physical scars. Self-harming behaviors can be mental, and also there are things that don't leave scars, or don't leave the typical scars that we associate with self-harm. So some people will be looking out for these specific scars, and that's the only thing that they'll count as self-harm, and that's also why I guess why the prevalence is a lot higher in a very specific group of people, which is teenage girls, but the methods are different between different age groups, between the genders, and also many people try to hide it. Many people go through life trying to hide that they've ever self-harmed, or maybe that they actively do self-harm, because there is so much shame and so much stigma and so much fear around this topic. So now we've been through or we've got through what self-harm itself is. So let's reiterate its behaviors that are done with the goal of hurting yourself. Anybody can self-harm. There are many methods that are used, and exactly. So the one thing that's missing is if I say it's not an attention-seeking thing, well, what is it? So let's stick with the attention topic. Obviously, there will be people where it is a cry for help, where they feel dreadful, they might feel either depressed or anxious or frustrated, or they have so many emotions and they don't know where to go and they don't know how to deal with these emotions. So yes, it might be a cry for help because they don't know how to talk about these emotions, or don't know who to go to, who to talk to. They don't want to burden anyone. They don't have the resources or whatever. So they try and find other outlets. And it can be a cry for help, particularly if you show someone or whatever, then it can be a cry for help. But it doesn't have to be. Many people get into the habit of self-harming, and this sounds a bit odd if I say it like that, but there is a biological, psychological component to it as well, and self-harming can be addictive. You can become addicted to self-harm, and the reason is if you're putting great strain or pain on your body, it will try and fight it, because our pain response is there for a reason. So if you touch something that's hot, the pain is there so that you retract your hand, that you pull your hand away very quickly. But if you're self-harming yourself, your body's a bit confused. Why are we doing this? And it tries to make it as comfortable as possible. So you actually release neurotransmitters that make you feel good, which is the same thing that happens in endurance running. So this is the body's coping mechanism, where something so awful is happening that your body tries to, with its own reward pathway, make it feel a little bit more, not quite as bad. And that is another reason why some people self-harm, is so they want to feel something. It can be that you feel nothing and that everything feels very numb, and physical pain particularly can make you feel something, which is better than feeling nothing. What I said before with the cry for help, many people just absolutely don't know how to regulate emotions, don't know how to deal with emotions, don't have coping mechanisms, and they would just like to scream and I don't know what, but because that's not really socially acceptable, they'll try and find other outlets again. So there are so many reasons why people self-harm. There's not one root cause where we can say, oh, this is the reason why everyone self-harms. And that's something that's very important to think about when addressing this topic to someone that you love, but also generally when talking about it. Self-harm is very personal, and it's something that many people are embarrassed of, and it doesn't logically make sense. And the person who self-harms knows it doesn't logically make sense. No one thinks, oh yes, I'm going to do this because it's wonderful, because it's fabulous and it's going to make me feel great. That is not the reason why anyone self-harms. I can promise you that. So, What I did promise you, though, was that we would talk about how to deal with it. And I'm going to start with the person who is affected the most, and that would be the person who self-harms. First of all, I'm going to say to you directly, I'm really sorry that you're going through this, and I'm really sorry that you have these feelings and that you don't know how you can deal with them. And I'm also going to say to you, I know it doesn't help to know that other people feel this too, because you think, well, okay, maybe they feel it too, but it doesn't make me feel better. But I do want to tell you that you are not alone, and I know you may feel alone and you may feel incredibly ashamed, but you're not alone. So many people have these same struggles, and you are incredibly brave for holding on and for listening to this podcast and for thinking about it and thinking about yourself and these behaviors and maybe trying to analyze what they are. You are incredibly brave and incredibly strong. And if no one's told you today, and even if they have, I am proud of you. It's hard. Some tips that I personally can give you is to try and find out, where does this behavior come from? And there are several ways that you can find this out. And that is a step that needs to be taken at some stage, finding out why you want to self-harm, what makes you feel this way. But before we get into that, obviously, if you can do these things on your own, it's wonderful, but it's absolutely not necessary. There is no shame in seeking help. There are counselors and therapists and people we can go to, and also if you maybe don't have the financial resources or you don't want to tell your parents or whatever, there are resources that can be found, people who will charge less money or no money. If you're in Vienna, there's a department in the big hospital for people who self-harm, and there are options to get out of it. And that's something that's very important, knowing that it doesn't have to be forever, and that if you want to accept help, there is help that can be accepted, and there is help out there that can be made use of. But as I'm not a licensed therapist, and this behavior is so individual and I can't give you a therapy session here anyway, I will try and talk more about the aspects that don't directly deal with why people self-harm, because as we've said, this is very, very individual, very specific, very different for every person. But something that many have in common is the incredible feeling of guilt, the incredible feeling of just feeling awful afterwards, feeling stupid, feeling small, feeling worthless and hopeless, and none of this is true. You are not a burden to anyone else. It doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you worthless. It doesn't mean any of these things. It is one part of a whole that maybe means you're suffering from something or you don't know how to deal with something at the moment. And it is obviously really awful for you right now, but it does not change your worth. So what can you do maybe after you've self-harmed? Well, first and foremost, take care of yourself. And the first way to take care of yourself is medically. If wounds or any types of harm is severe, please call an ambulance or go to the hospital or go to the doctors, or at least tell someone. And if you don't believe it's severe enough, then take care of any physical wounds that you may have, bandage them up, take care of yourself, and then take care of yourself mentally. Take a deep breath, try and distract yourself, do whatever feels good and what feels right and what you need at this moment, because only you can know what you need. Now, if we talk to parents or guardians, particularly of a child who self-harms, the most important thing I can tell you, and this might sting a bit, and I'm sorry that this is the first thing I'm coming out with, but it is not about you. The children aren't doing it because they want to, because they want to punish you. They're not doing it because you told them off. It does not have anything to do with you. Of course, I'm not saying again that parent or guardian and children situations, they can be strained and this can lead generally to mental problems and that. I'm not talking about specific situations, but I'm saying that self-harm behavior in general, it's not about you. It's a way, maybe not a very healthy way, but it's a way how they try and cope, how people try and cope with these feelings that they are not equipped to cope with otherwise, or don't know how to cope otherwise. And if you have a trusting relationship with your child, I would very much encourage talking to them, but not in a telling off manner. The worst things you can say is, "Oh, why did you do this? You've hurt me so much by doing it, and you don't know what you've put me through and what you're putting me through," and don't make it about yourself. In this situation, you are the parent or guardian and they are the child, and it's not about you. Your feelings are important. It's important that you can deal with these things and that you also get the help and support that you need, because it can be very hard dealing with a child who is suffering so immensely. And there are things like support groups for parents, there are resources, but in this situation it's not about you, and don't make it about yourself. And also please, please, please don't tell them off, because as I said before, most people feel guilty enough as it is. Many people will try and lie and will make up excuses for why they self-harmed, or even make up excuses actually if they self-harmed. And here it's important to find balance. Knowing if you have the type of relationship where your child can come to you with these worries and with these feelings. And again, if this is not possible, if they do not want to talk about it, then again, don't take this personally and encourage them to find someone else to speak to. And again, them not wanting to speak to you, it doesn't mean that they don't love you, it doesn't mean that anything is wrong, but particularly as people get older, there are feelings and thoughts that we don't want to share with our parents. They might embarrass us, they might scare us. And also, people who self-harm are often very scared of being judged, and you don't want to be judged by your own parents. And the way to get people to talk about their problems is to lead by example. Have open conversations about mental health and about therapy, and don't use therapy as an insult. Don't say, "Oh, he needs therapy," as an insult, because it's not an insult. We can all very much benefit from therapy. And again, obviously there are often financial constraints. I'm aware how expensive therapy can be, but there are other resources, there are other people that can be talked to and who can be found. And if you lead by example that it's okay to talk about these things and that it's okay to reach out and seek help, then the child who is suffering is much more likely to actually want to do this. And and just make them feel safe. Make them feel as safe as they can. This doesn't mean that you have to sugarcoat any behaviors. You're not supposed to walk on eggshells with them or anything. Just make them feel safe and show them that they can talk to you and that you're open for conversations. And do your homework, which I guess you're doing if you're listening to this podcast, but do your homework. Read up on it, try and understand, and if they tell you something, believe them. Believe your child. They know their feelings and their emotions best. And now the third party that I want to address are those who love someone who self-harms, where it's not sort of a parent or guardian and child position, but more if it's one of your friends, or if it's your boyfriend or girlfriend or husband or wife or whatever, or anyone else who's important in your life. Particularly if this person is a legal adult. Again, I can only reiterate what I said to the parents. It's not about you. They're not doing it to punish you, and don't shame them, don't guilt trip them, and please don't treat them any differently than you normally would. Don't look down on them, don't see them as sort of these weird or broken people or something disgusting or something you should be ashamed of, because none of that is true. None of that is in any way true. Establish boundaries. You need healthy communication in every relationship. So you need to establish boundaries. Maybe if you're their trusted person and they want to tell you everything, know that it's completely okay to protect yourself and say, I cannot cope with this. And say, I'm really sorry, and encourage them to find someone else. I'm really sorry I'm not saying that you have to apologize for your boundaries. Your boundaries should be established, but that was just an example of something that you could say, that I'm really sorry, I don't have the mental capacity for this at the moment, but then you can still encourage them to find someone to talk to and to find someone who can actually help them. Don't marginalize them or in any other way ostracize them or have them not part of your group, because nothing has changed about them just because they're struggling. But still, it can be very difficult to see these behaviors. Maybe another step harder is if you live with someone who self-harms, you might be more likely to see the direct aftermath. And here again, my advice is very similar to what I said to the sufferer themselves. So see if they need any immediate medical care, any intensive medical care or emergency medical care, then don't hesitate to call an ambulance or whatever. And here it sort of depends on your relationship to this person, because if you force yourself on them as the hero and sort of portray them as a damsel in distress, it doesn't help. And some people will feel embarrassed, and some people don't want your help, and others will. So talk to them. And talking is something that's generally very important. Try and understand what's going on, but also choose when to have this conversation, because it can be mostly self-harm happens in situations where someone is very emotionally aroused, so where they're feeling very strong emotions. And I talked about the neurotransmitters before. There can be a hormonal rush, there can be an adrenaline rush, and this is not true for everyone who self-harms, but some people might have a literal physiological changed state. So one of the stereotypes, but also the diagnostic criteria of borderline personality disorder, for example, is a tendency to engage in self-destructive behavior and to self-harm. And many people who suffer from borderline personality disorder, for example, will truly not feel like themselves in times when they self-harm. And again, they rationally know that it's not very helpful, but if you have all of these hormones and everything rushing through your body, it can make things very hard. So don't try to talk to someone about it in one of these situations where they're really emotional, but try to choose a moment and have a kind and understanding conversation about it. And now the last topic that I want to talk about is self-harm scars and self-harm marks in general. So as we said, not everything leaves physical scars, but many forms of self-harm do. So if you see someone who is self-harmed, think about your relationship to them. If you feel like you can talk to them, and also that they'll want to talk to you and that they feel safe, then obviously there are situations where you can address it, but never, particularly not publicly, but generally don't comment on someone's scars or self-harm marks. Again, boundaries are important. For some people it will be okay if you say something, but then the tonality and everything is incredibly important. I mean, if you notice something and you ask someone, are you okay? That can make someone feel incredibly validated. Just generally asking, are you okay? Or how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is there anything that's worrying you at the moment? Is very different than pointing out someone's scars. Again, not everyone who wears long clothes in the summertime necessarily has self-harm. There are very many reasons and all of them legit. But if someone is trying to cover their scars and doesn't want to show them and doesn't want to be public about them, then please don't pester them about it. Please don't ask a million questions. Don't try to forcefully rip clothes off them. These are all things that I've seen before, and that's really, really horrific behavior. And just don't do that. Don't comment on scars. Don't point them out. Don't talk about someone behind their back about their scars. Just let people be. A discussion that I saw before on Instagram, it was an influencer who had an amputated leg, and she said that many people request trigger warnings in front of every single post. And it made me think about trigger warnings and self-harm scars. I'm not talking about open wounds because I think that's a different topic, but actual scars. And I think it's hard because I know it can maybe be triggering to some people, and it can be difficult to see, but I don't know. I just think it's very difficult because if you're forcing someone to put a trigger warning in front of every single image that they post of themselves that has absolutely nothing to do with the topic, it's re-traumatizing for them every single time. And also, I've read studies about trigger warnings where they've actually said that in many cases they do more bad than good, particularly if in situations like this. So here at the beginning I did put a trigger warning because I'm talking about self-harm the entire episode, and I know that this can be disturbing and difficult for many people, and I wanted you to know what you can expect. But if I post a picture of myself doing something completely unrelated, and then I write, I make a big slide saying trigger warning, scars, then people are much more likely to actually start noticing them and actually start looking for them. And it can be re-traumatizing for the person who's self-harmed, as well as people who might have a hard time with this. And as much as it's important not to trigger other people and to be mindful of other people. It's also really important that we talk about these things that affect so many people. And also, yeah, to some extent, I'm not saying that we should normalize self-harm by saying, it's a normal or good behavior or whatever, but many people do have these struggles and do have these scars. And if we can be a bit more open about it, then people won't feel as embarrassed about having these scars, which it's not that different than if you've had a scar from an operation. I think there are lots of difficulties if we compare physical and mental illnesses. It can help understand sort of some principles, but I think it can be a difficult thing to do. But here, the scars are a physical manifestation of a mental struggle, whereas after an operation, we have physical scars from a physical problem. But neither is more or less valid or whatever. And I mean, again, here you shouldn't go commenting on anyone's scars, just anything, scars, stretch marks, all of these things, unless you're worried that someone is in immediate physical danger. Don't comment on these. Don't comment on these things. And if you do, there is a way to do it. So my take-home message for everyone is be kind and be empathetic and understanding in these conversations. Make the other person feel safe. All parties involved should establish boundaries, what is okay to talk about and when. And the conversations should be open and ongoing. Thank you very much for listening to this not so fun episode, but it's really important for me that we talk about all sorts of different topics. Thank you very much.